In past videos, we have seen that throughout history, the state has often used language standardization as a tool of governance, which often leads to the disappearance of regional languages as diverse, linguistic, and ethnic communities are unified under one nation. We have also seen that many peoples ended up adopting the language of the invaders. Yet, there are notable exceptions, one being the Kurds. If you have ever traveled to the Middle East, you may have already heard that the Kurds are the largest people without a state. Like the Ainu in Japan or the Scots in Great Britain, the Kurds represent a distinct people incorporated into a newly formed nation-state. And like the Basques or the Sami peoples, they are spread across several states, namely Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, with a few still residing in Armenia and Azerbaijan. In total, this amounts to about 40 million people. But who are the Kurds? Are they truly one single people? And most importantly, do they really speak the same language? Well, let's find out. The Kurds are the inhabitants of Kurdistan, a geographical area spanning parts of the Middle East between the Zagros and Taurus Mountains. However, much of the history remains shrouded in mystery. There is little anthropological evidence to suggest that the Kurds share a single ethnic background, which would mean that Kurdishness is a unifying identity formed by the merging of various ancient groups over time, similar to our modern understanding of the concept of nationality. Despite this, several theories about their origins exist. The wave of nationalism that swept through the 20th century inspired many groups around the world to claim noble lineages, and the Kurds are no exception. They often assert descent from the Medes, a prestigious civilization from antiquity, but the time gap is too significant to establish this connection as certain. What is undeniable is that the mountains of Kurdistan have been inhabited for millennia. Sumerian tablets, Babylonian texts, or Greek historians often referred to different tribes inhabiting this part of the Middle East. We have the Guti, the Kardakoi, the Kurtier, all mountain tribes with more or less close ties to the Seleucids and the Romans. But despite the obvious phonetic similarities with the name Kurd, philologists caution against assuming a direct connection, suggesting instead that these tribes may not be related at all. After all, any ethnic group ending up in these mountains would have developed similar lifestyles. As you see, it's quite complicated. All in all, the most likely hypothesis is that the modern Kurds emerged from the blending of Iranian and non-Iranian tribes as peoples migrated westward from the Persian plateau into the Zagros Mountains and the anti-Taurus ranges of Turkey. This is all the more plausible when considering the numerous migrations and displacements that occurred in pre-Islamic times, particularly under the Achaemenid Empire, which often relocated entire populations to govern its vast territories. As they expanded westwards, they incorporated various indigenous influences of the Zagros Mountains, ultimately forming a unified linguistic identity. Modern Kurds would thus be an amalgamation of Medes, Mardi, Manian, Kardu, or Kurtier tribes, most of whom likely spoke closely related Median dialects. This migration theory could be supported by geography, particularly since the Median capital, Ekbatana, now Hamadan, was located east of present-day Kurdish regions. However, the exact timeline and migration patterns remain uncertain. Today, the modern Kurdish identity reflects the heritage of nomadic and semi-nomadic peoples who have inhabited these mountains for centuries, if not millennia. Keeping this in mind, let's now explore the intricacies of their language. Contrary to popular belief, not all Kurds speak the same language. Kurdish is not a single standardized language, but a continuum of related dialects spoken across several countries. These dialects are not always mutually intelligible, leading to debates about whether Kurdish is one single language. The two primary variations are Kurmanji, also called Northern Kurdish, and Sorani, Central Kurdish, each with multiple dialects. Kurds use different alphabets based on their region. In Turkey and Syria, a Latin Turkish script called Hawar is used, while in Iran and Iraq, a modified Perso-Arabic script known as the Sorani alphabet is prevalent. In the Caucasus, both modified Cyrillic and Latin scripts are used. Needless to say, this further emphasizes the lack of mutual intelligibility among the already numerous variations. Despite the diversity, all Kurdish dialects share core linguistic features, suggesting a common ancient origin. Kurdish is classified as an Indo-European language within the northwestern Iranian language family. Its roots may trace back to Parthian, with Median serving as a substrate. However, this classification appears to be too simplistic to truly reflect the intricate history of the development of Kurdish. Even though it is classified as northwestern Iranian, it also features elements of southwestern Iranian languages, particularly Persian. The considerable lexical overlap between Kurdish and Persian has even led to claims that Kurdish is merely a dialect of Persian, an argument often used to downplay the political aspirations of the Kurdish people. The reality is that determining the exact classification of Kurdish is challenging due to the incomplete knowledge of its multiple dialects, the massive influence of Persian, the uncertainty regarding the migration patterns, as well as the lack of a universally accepted model for subgrouping Western Iranian languages. Tracing its historical development is further complicated by the lack of early records, with the earliest written evidence apparently only dating back to the 16th century of the Common Era. To complicate things even further, some languages classified as Kurdish aren't Kurdish at all. Zazaki and Gorani maintain distinct linguistic characteristics and don't seem to have been impacted by southwestern Iranian languages. However, these languages play a part in the history of Kurdish variations. The influence of Gorani on Sorani may explain why it's so different from Kurmanji, even though other languages such as Turkish and Arabic may also have played a part. But the incredible aspect of the issue is that despite all these differences, the Kurds consider they speak one single language. This cannot be explained by linguistic factors, as we have seen. So, why is it? Well, this is simply because Kurdish isn't simply defined in linguistic terms. It is also shaped by cultural, political, and social factors. Many speakers of Kurdish dialects, along with those who speak Zazaki or Gorani, identify as part of the Kurdish ethnic group and often seek political self-organization. This leads them to view the distinctions between the dialects as artificial divisions of an imagined unified Kurdish language. In some respect, speaking Kurdish is more of an ethnic or political statement. This is especially true for Zazaki and Gorani speakers, since these languages can't linguistically be considered Kurdish. If language alone doesn't validate this common Kurdish identity, could history help support it? To understand the history of a people, their name is often a good starting point. The term Kurd has contested origins. Some propose that it may have derived from the Persian word Gord, meaning hero. This would be an Iranian reinterpretation of local names like Kardu, historically used in Mesopotamia. On the other hand, others trace Kurd to the Middle Persian term Kurt, which translates to nomad or tent dweller. This interpretation reflects the pastoral, semi-nomadic lifestyle associated with Kurdish tribes during the Sasanian period. While both theories are plausible, the nomadic origin is often seen as more precise. The term first appeared in the Sasanian epic Karnamak e Ardashir e Papakan, which traces back to the 5th or the 7th century of the Common Era, a Middle Persian text recounting the legendary story of Ardashir I, the founder of the Sasanian Empire. Following the Muslim conquest of Persia, the term transitioned into Arabic as Kurdi or Akrad, primarily referring to nomadic tribes rather than to a specific ethnic group. However, this initial label for a way of life soon evolved into a broader shared identity. By the 10th century, Arabic scholars such as al-Mas'udi recognized the Kurds as a distinct linguistic group separate from the Persians. By the 11th century, the term was increasingly used as an ethnonym, moving beyond its original connotation of nomadism. The reasons for this shift remain unclear, but it may be linked to significant social and political changes in the region at a time marked by the rise and fall of various dynasties. Increased interactions among various groups, including Arabic scholars and local rulers, likely fostered a growing awareness of the linguistic and cultural distinctions among the Kurdish population. As scholars began to acknowledge the Kurds as a distinct group, this recognition marked a crucial step towards a more defined ethnic identity. This newly solidified collective consciousness would later transpire in historical events. Despite lacking a formal state, the Kurds played a significant role in Middle Eastern history during the Middle Ages, particularly between the 9th and 12th centuries, a period known as the Iranian Renaissance or Iranian Intermezzo, an era that witnessed the rise of native Iranian Muslim dynasties following the 7th century Arab conquest and the fall of the Sasanian Empire. As the Abbasid Caliphate weakened due to political fragmentation, economic decline, and external pressures, local leaders and dynasties, including many of Kurdish descent, began to emerge. One prominent example is the Hassanwahid dynasty in the mid-10th century. However, they were all short-lived, eventually being absorbed by bigger powers. But the most prominent Kurdish figure that emerged at the time is undoubtedly Saladin. Known for reclaiming Jerusalem from the Crusaders, he founded the Ayyubid dynasty in 1171, which would end up controlling Egypt, the Levant, Hejaz, Yemen, and parts of Anatolia and Iraq until the mid-13th century. Under the Ayyubids, several languages appear to have been spoken. Arabic was the prominent language, while the ruling class often spoke Northern Kurdish, reflecting the heritage. Persian also played a role in literature and court contexts, with Turkish used in military settings, showcasing the dynasty's multicultural nature. However, after these centuries of glory, the Kurds would witness the rise of two colossal empires whose centuries-long conflicts would shape the destiny of the Kurdish people into the modern era. Although various Kurdish emirates appeared over the centuries, they were frequently absorbed or crushed by dominant rulers due to shifting geopolitical landscapes. This pattern was further worsened by the rise of the Ottoman and Safavid empires in the 14th and 16th century. Many conflicts arose between the two giants, most ending up with the Ottoman Empire's territorial expansion. Kurdish regions were thus increasingly integrated into the empire, particularly after the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514, when the Ottomans defeated the Persians, annexing eastern Anatolia and parts of Upper Mesopotamia. The Ottomans implemented systems to govern these newly acquired Kurdish territories, which gradually reduced the autonomy of tribal leaders. It is around that period that the famous Kurdish poet Ahmed Khani composed the renowned epic Mem and Zin, which narrates the tale of an impossible love between two young Kurds from opposing tribes. Beneath the storyline, the poet advocates for the independence of Kurdistan. This poem is considered the national epic of the Kurds and one of the foundational works of Kurdish literature. The Treaty of Zuhab, signed between the two empires in 1639, further fragmented Kurdish territories. It effectively recognized Ottoman control over modern-day Iraq and Safavid control over Persia's western territories, splitting Kurdish communities across two distinct political and cultural spheres. This division laid the foundation for the fragmented geopolitical landscape that Kurdish populations continue to experience today. After the collapse of the Safavid Empire in 1736, other dynasties took over, including the Zend dynasty, which is sometimes regarded as originally Kurdish. All in all, throughout these centuries, Kurdish communities continued to resist the centralization imposed by both the Persians and Ottomans. However, it is essential to contextualize the geopolitical configurations of the time and the often idealized unity among the Kurds themselves. The conflict depicted in Mem and Zin was not unfounded, as there were numerous rivalries among the different Kurdish tribes, which frequently led to open conflict. For political gains, some tribal leaders willingly accepted Ottoman sovereignty over the territories. For instance, the Baban, sealed alliances with the Ottomans and actively participated in the conflict against the Persians. Nevertheless, none of these alliances or configurations were permanent. The centuries leading up to the end of the First World War were characterized by shifting alliances and reversals between the Kurds on one side and the Persians and Ottomans on the other. But the fall of the Ottoman Empire was about to radically reshuffle the cards. The fall of the Ottoman Empire, coupled with foreign intervention during the 20th century, profoundly impacted the Kurds. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 promised some autonomy for the Kurds following the Ottoman Empire's territorial losses after the war. However, these hopes quickly diminished with the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923, which replaced Sèvres and recognized the sovereignty of the Republic of Turkey, establishing its modern borders. Both treaties were based on the earlier Sykes-Picot agreement between France and the UK, which partitioned the former Ottoman Empire. This disappointment ignited a sense of Kurdish nationalism in the 20th century, with intellectuals and activists advocating for a common identity and self-determination. Throughout the century, many promises were made, but hopes were always dashed as state powers continually exploited the Kurdish issue for their own interests, even nations with their own Kurdish minorities seeking rights. This is notably the case in Iraq and Iran. As diplomatic tensions heightened in the late 1960s due to border disputes, both countries took advantage of internal divisions for their own gain. Iraq encouraged Arab separatism in Iran's Khuzestan region, while Iran countered by supporting the Kurds. The Iranians supplied military equipment and funding to the Kurds, especially under the leadership of Mustafa al-Barzani. During the conflict, Barzani himself sought support from the US, which viewed backing Kurdish insurgents as a way to undermine Iraq's alliance with the Soviet Union. But this turbulent chapter ended abruptly with the Algiers Accords, which resolved the border dispute. The fallout was devastating. Barzani's forces collapsed and thousands of Kurds were forced to flee to Iran in search of safety. Meanwhile, the Kurds in Iran were also on a quest for independence, but they faced many of the same disappointments. The Shah of Iran had tried to foster a sense of national identity by renaming the country to Iran, aiming to include various ethnicities beyond just the Persians. However, the Kurds and their language were still not recognized. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 offered a brief glimmer of hope for autonomy, but the newly formed Islamic Republic failed to acknowledge Kurdish as an official language. Today, the situation varies across the region. In Iraq, the Kurds enjoy a degree of autonomy, with Kurdish recognized as an official language alongside Arabic. However, in Iran, while Kurds are recognized as an ethnic minority, the fact that their language lacks official status limits their rights, especially in education. In Turkey, the Kurds aren't recognized as a distinct ethnic minority. Instead, they are seen as part of the broader Turkish nation. This leads to significant challenges for their independence claims. Meanwhile, in Syria, Kurdish groups have established Rojava as a semi-autonomous region where they actively promote their language and culture. However, ongoing conflict complicates the situation and formal recognition of their rights remains elusive. As we have seen, the Kurds do not represent a homogeneous ethnic, linguistic, or even cultural community. Despite this, it's fascinating to realize that a distinct Kurdish identity began to manifest long ago. From a geopolitical standpoint, it looks to me that the Kurdish issue has largely been instrumentalized for specific interests, but this goes beyond the scope of this channel. At present, it's difficult to determine how the Kurdish issue could potentially evolve in the future. The current configurations, as well as the sometimes diverging aspirations of the Kurds themselves, depending on the state they live in, further complicates the problem. Despite this, I hope that this video helped you understand the question a little bit better. I must say I rarely struggled to understand a topic as much as I did for this one. My God, the headache.
The poor girl. She pulled out her hair so bad it almost became straight.
You can also support my work on Instagram, where I posted the drawings I made for this video. Let me know in the comments your insights regarding the issue, and maybe see you next time.